Hello horse racing fans, Seabiscuit. He is both my favorite horse and movie. I have to thank him for being one of the reasons I fell in love with horse racing as a kid. But as I've grown up, so has my knowledge, and the movie, while still great at including the major details of why he was amazing, is of course not 100% accurate. And it never could have been, being based on a way more detailed novel. Now some longtime fans of this channel might be asking, didn't you already make this video? Yes, I did, when I was 15 years old. Now, I am 20. I am proud of the original video, as it was one of the first really good ideas I had on this YouTube channel, but it's dated by my current standards, and this topic is fascinating enough to me that I have no problem researching it again to make a better video. Now before I get into my list, I must once again state that I understand that to make a biopic a cohesive story, you have to overlook or even change certain details about the historical figure in question. Non-fiction movies ironically do need a bit of fiction to fit the storytelling format. This is 100% for fun, coming from a die-hard Seabiscuit fan. So with that established, let's talk about the real horse and where the movie comes in. Here are 10 inaccuracies with Seabiscuit.
At almost 18 hands, he's as big as he is fast.
18 hands? Too fast.
War Admiral was not 18 hands. For most racing fans who saw this film, this seems to be the inaccuracy they remember the best. In the movie, War Admiral is stated to be 18 hands, a gargantuan size for a racehorse. This is done to give the match race a David and Goliath feel, as Seabiscuit beats the large, unbeatable Triple Crown winner. However, while he was never an underdog like the Biscuit, War Admiral was the opposite of large. Side-by-side comparisons of the time showing the two next to each other put War Admiral and Seabiscuit at the same height, 15 hands. And when looking at more in-depth measurements, there are even some parts where Seabiscuit was larger. Seabiscuit had a greater girth, a larger chest, and outweighed the Admiral by 80 pounds. Meanwhile, the sleeker War Admiral had a longer body and leg bones, but the difference between all these categories was down to mere inches. Along with being called the Admiral, the Mighty Atom was another favorite nickname from the press about War Admiral. So War Admiral was definitely not 18 hands, but some might be curious if there was ever a champion racehorse who got to be that tall. The answer is yes. Rosebin, a champion sprinter and Hall of Famer from the turn of the 20th century, was 17 3-hands, or only an inch shorter, and Holy Roller, an Australian horse who won the Group 2 Crystal Mile, stood at 18 1-hands.
I couldn't see him! What the hell are you talking about? He was flying up your tail!
Yeah, well, I can't!
What?
See out there!
Red never confessed he was blind. After losing the 1937 Santa Anita Handicap, Tom interrogates Red for the botched ride, and in an explosive confession, Red admits he is blind in one eye. A very dramatic scene that leads to the repetition of one of the most important lines in Seabiscuit.
You don't throw a whole life away just because it's banged up a little bit.
Which was also one of my yearbook quotes in high school. While great for movies, Red never admitted he was half blind until after his riding career ended. If he had admitted something like this after the Santa Anita Handicap, then his career would have ended right there. And while in the movies it's implied he lost his eye due to boxing, he actually lost it while working out a horse. While working out, another horse kicked up an unknown object, likely a rock, and it struck him in the back of the head, damaging the visual center of his brain. The fact he was a prize fighter is true, however.
It's not just some race. It's the Santa Anita.
The 1938 Santa Anita Handicap. In the movie, the first time the Santa Anita Handicap is shown, it's the 1937 running, where Seabiscuit infamously loses to Rosemont by a nose. That is all true. The film then focuses on the build-up between Seabiscuit and War Admiral's match race. However, in real life, the gap between these two races was a year and a half. Enough time that Seabiscuit ran in the Santa Anita Handicap a second time, and just like the first attempt, he lost the race by a nose. Although the circumstances surrounding it were totally different. In this race, Seabiscuit was instead hampered by a rough trip and having to carry top weight of 130 pounds. The horse who beat him, Stagehand, was a 3-year-old who ran him down carrying a gaunt 100 pounds, the only time a 3-year-old has ever won the big cap. It makes sense that for the movie, there was no need to repeat themselves, but it's fascinating to know that Seabiscuit lost the richest race in the world not once, but twice, by the slimmest of margins. There was also one other major change. Red Pollard was not riding him that day.
Just before the turn.
Like you did in the Gold Cup.
Exactly.
The match race was not the first time George Woolf rode Seabiscuit. A major scene leading up to the match race is the now injured Red Pollard teaching George all of Seabiscuit's tricks and how to ride him in the race, including the famous looking him in the eye trick. That is partially true. Red did break his leg, and George had to fill in for him, but it's framed as the first time George has ever ridden Seabiscuit, when George had ridden Seabiscuit before. In fact, the match race was their 10th time partnering up in 1938 alone. Because that leg break wasn't Red's only injury. In early 1938, Red rode another of Howard's horses, Fairnightus, but she clipped heels and toppled over Red, breaking many of his bones. So George's first time riding Seabiscuit was actually in the aforementioned 1938 Santa Anita Handicap. Under Woolf, Seabiscuit won 5 races, including the inaugural Hollywood Gold Cup and a match race at Del Mar against Ligarodi. So Seabiscuit and Woolf managed to win 2 match races in 1938. But one part that is accurate is that after beating War Admiral, the last time Woolf rode Seabiscuit in a race would be his first start of 1939, where he would be injured and sidelined for a year.
We just have to flush him out a little.
How?
Cash.
$100,000.
The biggest purse in American history.
I sure hope so.
You'd get every top Eastern thoroughbred, all of them. You'd put this place on the map.
Charles Howard did not create the Santa Anita Handicap. In the movie, the Santa Anita Handicap is proposed by Charles Howard as a way to lure War Admiral and other East Coast champions to California and prove Seabiscuit could beat any horse. In reality, the Santa Anita Handicap had already been run for 2 years, being inaugurated in 1935. And even if Charles Howard did inaugurate the Santa Anita Handicap in 1937, the timeline of events would still be incorrect. By this point in the movie, War Admiral is already established to be a Triple Crown winner. And the Santa Anita Handicap is run on its correct date of February 27th, 1937. Nothing wrong just yet, until you realize that War Admiral won the Triple Crown on June 5th, 1937, 3 months after the big cap. Red and Seabiscuit's first race. In the movie, Seabiscuit's first start being ridden by Red Pollard is an allowance race at Santa Anita. During it, Seabiscuit gets fouled by another horse, and Red blows the race to chase the culprit and give him a piece of his mind. It's meant to bring to light some of Red's deeper personal issues, and as a starting point for the team as they soon get better. In reality, their first race together was the Motor City Handicap in Detroit, where they finished 4th to Myrtlewood, one of the greatest fillies of that decade. She won 15 of 22 races and set or equaled 5 records, mainly at sprinting distances. But as she decimated Seabiscuit, she set a track record at 1 mile and a 16th, proving her versatility. Like Seabiscuit, she also had 3 match races during her career, beating record-setting horses of both sexes, Miss Merriment and Clang, although Clang reversed the order in a rematch. She concluded in 1936 as Champion Older Female and Champion Sprinter, and after retirement, she became an integral broodmare, birthing Kentucky Oaks winner Miss Dogwood, and her influence is present in the bloodlines of horses like Seattle Slew and Mr. Prospector. Of course, she is also currently in the Hall of Fame, and it just so happened that she crossed roads with Seabiscuit as he began his partnership with Red Pollard. As for Seabiscuit's first victory under Red, this is also depicted as a win at Santa Anita. Once again, the answer is instead in Detroit. Only 16 days after losing to Myrtlewood, in their third start as partners, Seabiscuit and Red won the Governor's Handicap by a neck. Also in the field was Azúcar, a flattened steeplechase horse who won the inaugural Santa Anita Handicap in 1935, a sign of things to come.
This is Tock Mclaughlin live at Clocker's Corner.
Tock Mclaughlin is not a real person. This one is pretty simple. The radio announcer, played by William H. Macy, Tock, is an entirely fictional character used to fill in the part of radio broadcasters of the time who covered the sport of horse racing. That won't stop me, however, from wishing that Frank Gallagher, also known as the narrator from Curious George, was a real horse radio broadcaster.
Frankie, come on, it's a glorious day outside.
I'm reading.
Charles Howard did not have one son. During the film, Charles is only shown to have one kid, Frank Howard, who died in a car accident. That part is true, but Charles actually had 4 kids. His most prominent was Lindsay Howard, who, just like his dad, owned racehorses. One of his closest friends being the famous crooner and actor Bing Crosby, who together formed Bing Lynn Stables. The most famous horse they owned was the previously mentioned Ligorodi, whose loss in a match race to Seabiscuit helped put Del Mar on the map as a premier racetrack. Along with predating the match with War Admiral, the match race had a purse $10,000 greater. One last factoid about Seabiscuit's history with match races was before his 2 big races against Ligorodi and War Admiral, as a 3-year-old, he won a handicap race at Saratoga against only one other opponent, named Trefford. This race was the last time he ran under trainer Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons and was owned by Wheatley Stables. Just 12 days later, he ran in that faithful Motor City Handicap against Myrtlewood, with his new and final connections, which we know very well. Seabiscuit never won the San Onofre, Miguel, or Rafael handicaps. To establish Seabiscuit's rise in fame, we are given a montage of races he wins all at Santa Anita, ending with a film reel that states he's won 6 stakes races in a row. In a twist, this actually understates Seabiscuit. He won 7 in a row. And the races he won were not the ones shown in the montage. The San Rafael and Miguel both only existed after Seabiscuit had raced, and the San Onofre has never existed. He did win 3 straight in California, but they were the San Juan Capistrano, Marchbank, and Bay Meadows handicaps, and only the first one was run at Santa Anita. The last 4 were the Brooklyn, Butler, Yonkers, and Massachusetts handicaps. This also bleeds into the fact the movie makes no mention of Seabiscuit's successes outside of California, except for his win over War Admiral, giving off the false impression that it's the first time he's raced in the East. Which makes sense for the sake of making a manageable 140-minute movie, but it's an interesting part of Seabiscuit's career you'd have to learn about from the book. Which also goes for every other fact mentioned, and so much more that I can't scratch the surface of in just one video. In terms of timeline, it is accurate that it takes place at around the same time of War Admiral's Triple Crown win, but once again, the 1937 Big Cap is shown afterward, when his defeat in that race was the last race he lost before he started his win streak. Kayak. In the final race, the 1940 Santa Anita Handicap, we get a truly amazing scene that makes everyone shed a tear of joy, as Seabiscuit and Red finally win the one race that's eluded them. It's what movies are made for, but the real story of the race differs in quite a few ways. Obviously, Seabiscuit's grand come-from-behind run spurred by George Woolf sacrificing his chances to win to get Seabiscuit running again did not happen, but is an amazing scene nonetheless. And even very small things like Seabiscuit actually wearing saddlecloth number 1 instead of 9. But the biggest omission for this race is that Seabiscuit's team had another horse in the race, Kayak, aka Kayak II. Kayak was bought in the same trip by Lynn Howard as Ligorodi, but was raced by Charles instead. When Seabiscuit got injured in 1939 and took the rest of the year off, Kayak pinch hit and ran in the 1939 Big Cap in Seabiscuit's place. And not just that, he won in track record time. Charles and Tom Smith's first win in the Santa Anita Handicap was with this horse, while Seabiscuit recovered. The same year, he also won the second Hollywood Gold Cup, and was awarded Champion Older Horse, but lost Horse of the Year to Chaladin, who ironically defeated him in the Pimlico Special, the same race Seabiscuit beat War Admiral the year before. Seabiscuit beat Kayak in their first meeting only a week before the 1940 Santa Anita Handicap, in the San Antonio Handicap. Then in the Big Cap, Seabiscuit ran away on the inside to win, with Kayak chasing in second, giving Howard and Tom Smith a Big Cap 1-2. There was a rumor that Kayak was forced to lose on purpose so Seabiscuit could go out a winner, because Seabiscuit is shown being whipped while Kayak was only hand-ridden. But there is minimal evidence to support this, and with almost all of it being hearsay. Seabiscuit was the best horse that day, and ran the fastest 1.25 miles at Santa Anita ever seen. And one last fun fact, the horse who finally broke his speed record in the Big Cap was Noor, 10 years later, who was also owned by Charles Howard. And just like Seabiscuit, defeated a Triple Crown winner during his career in Citation. A great horse, but when Charles was asked if Noor was another Seabiscuit, he simply replied, "There will never be another Seabiscuit," which couldn't be truer. That's why this horse is both a best-selling novel and an Oscar-nominated picture, because he is so universally inspiring, and the best parts of horse racing. So while of course some things do differ between the movie and the book, the movie was still able to capture why Seabiscuit was a hero in the time when he ran, when the world needed it the most. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and so long, Charlie!